Thank you very much for having me. My name is Simon. I work at Baanx, BAANX. We're effectively a Web 2 to Web 3 service platform. So I head up basically token loyalty and all things decentralization. My background I've been in this space for probably professionally about 3 years, building out a whole bunch of kind of decentralized payment applications. I actually led the stablecoin pilot settlement with MasterCard in a previous role. I didn't work at MasterCard. I worked for an issuer platform. I've also been involved in kind of advising and providing strategy input to a number of kind of early stage projects, especially around the Solana ecosystem, which obviously has been not such a great year over there. And then kind of historically, my background was kind of strategy and ecosystem growth. So I worked at Facebook kind of 2009, 2014, where I was kind of key member of the strat team there. And then decided that kind of decentralization and other things were the future. Started off in crypto in 2013. Always been relatively passionate. I was one of the people who learned the lessons of trading on Mount Gox back in the day. And kind of driven forward from there, really. So in terms of kind of what is Baanx, what is BXX, Baanx is basically, as I say, we're a Web 2 to Web 3 service platform. So what we're doing is basically trying to connect the kind of physical world with Web 3. What does that look like in a practical sense? Well, it looks like we do cards, lending, spending, borrowing, and we're moving a whole bunch of on-chain but non-custodial linked products. So we actually issued the world's first non-custodial MasterCard, which was in the Ledger wallet, which you may have seen. It's now live in the UK and Europe. And we work with kind of 30 underlying communities at the moment as partners, including people like Ledger, Tezos, 1inch, Reef, and a few others. So great to be here, and obviously happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sure, we've got some of the questions, because there is a few aspects of this project that that we really want to know about, and maybe we can first talk about these two goals that you want to achieve here. Because from one side you want to connect just regular clients through your app, and from the other side you got a business to business model that you can do something like you are saying, that their API driven platform that allows you to credit and cutting edge digital product. So can you tell a few things about that, about this connection to other businesses, how you can help them, and what is your service there?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we started off really with quite a simple model, which was kind of making crypto spendable, which we obviously had to do that in a fairly centralized way. And that journey started back in 2016, right? Where we were effectively looking at how we could provide kind of on-ramps and off-ramps. Then we decided actually to make it more interesting. What we had to do was start to link up a whole bunch of other products that provided liquidity, that provided the ability to borrow against your stable coin or borrow against your crypto, so that you could kind of effectively elect to spend in crypto or fiat. And then from there on in, we decided that basically what we'd ended up building was this kind of effectively big scale platform that had all of these B2B connections to a huge number of communities. And therefore what we should try to do is then bring in the principles of decentralization, move as much of this as possible on chain, because I think this year, probably more so than any other year, shows the benefits of decentralization and self-custody, remembering the fact that if it's not your keys, it's not your coins. And effectively then what we did was we added a whole load of utilities, so that if you're a Baanx or a CL customer, CL is our consumer brand. So if you look at Ledger, for example, if you look at Ledger Card, just looking at Google, it's actually branded as the Ledger CL card, powered by Ledger, delivered by Baanx. And what we decided to do really then was say, well, look, we've got all these different communities, we've got all this different utility. How can we start to give those users the benefits of decentralization? Because if they're in a self-custodial journey, i.e. being their own bank, how do we reward those users for taking that decision. And actually, more importantly, not make it a single ecosystem reward, make it cross ecosystem reward. So, for example, if you're a client at Ledger or a client at Tezos, you'll get the same benefit on each platform because you are one of our customers. And we thought that was kind of something that was quite key in terms of driving adoption towards Web3 growth and bringing Web3 utility into Web2. And I'll talk to you a minute about something we're just building with a new client, but that's probably the best use case for the underlying technology in terms of the final linkage. But hopefully I've answered your question there.
Sure. So you announced a few lately that you've got this partnership with Ledger, and can you tell me what does it mean for you as a project to have this big partnership, and what's the service gonna be from your side to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are actually the only people who have a native integration to Ledger Live dashboard. So if you actually go into Ledger Live now, especially if you're in Europe or UK, you can actually you can sign up for the card, you can onboard with us, and that basically gives you the ability to spend your crypto assets in real life linked to your Ledger device, but in a completely non-custodial way. You can also borrow, so we have we have crypto draft in there, where you can effectively apply for a crypto credit secured against your crypto. We also have stablecoin loans where you can borrow against stablecoin, which can be quite efficient for tax reasons. And also we have traditional crypto lending where you can borrow up to 20% interest free against your collateral. But the key to that is that all tokens remain within your custody. And in addition to that, obviously, I suppose we see the Ledger really as the best use case of a non-custodial piece, because what that means is that obviously, in reality, you've got the ability to be your own bank. And we're actually going to be introducing a few new features going into next year. So we're putting in some IBANs under a shared ledger so that you could actually load your ledger with fiat directly. And in addition to that, from next year, every new Ledger device will ship with a card in a box. So the best way to think about that product really is a bank in a box. You have complete control over it. It's your money, your custody, your control, but you don't lose any of the functionality that you would have by doing that, because you can still spend, you can still send, you can send in crypto, you can send in fiat, but ultimately, it's your money, you own it, you control it, it's on your device, and that to us, is a really exciting journey. Obviously, Ledger's a huge client. We've seen over 500,000 people already sign up. And what you should see really from kind of Q1 next year, end of Q1, is we'll be live in America as well. But also we're introducing decentralized rewards. So it's kind of proper Web3 loyalty. And what we looked at doing there, having spent the best part of 2 years looking for a decent solution as to how we could reward users, was we actually decided it didn't exist. So we decided to build it ourselves. So basically what we do is when the user onboards, the user can choose to tokenize themselves, i.e. turn themselves into an X NFT that goes into the wallet. And then we read the data under that user's wallet to work out and identify rewards for that user. So we don't actually ever dox the user. I might know that you're a man, I might know you live in Poland, and I might know how old you are. Everything else I just look at by reading the on-chain data. And then I work out how best to reward you. So that could be, for example, it may be an experience, it may be cashback, it may be a limited edition airdrop. But we're trying to make it a lot more interesting. And also we've been trying to disintermediate a number of providers. So, for example, things like affiliate income that you can earn at checkout online, we'll just give that straight back to the user where we identify it's available. So what we really wanted to do is kind of provide the benefits of decentralization to those users and do it in a kind of clean and clear way. But in the process of that, we're disintermediating a lot of the payments food chain, which I think actually is great because it incentivizes the user for having gone non-custodial and being their own bank in that process.
That's a lot of things that you are gonna implement there and do, and that's very interesting. I think it's gonna be really beneficial for you, this cooperation, and will give you good marketing for sure, because there is so many people that use Ledger, and this is like top one wallet for this industry. But I want to ask you something that about your app. You're gonna offer something like there was a crypto draft, stable loans. Can you tell more about how does it work? Because there was like this stable loans. If I understand this correctly, I can put on the collateral something like BTC and then get from you fiat. And that's gonna be beneficial for me, because it won't be like transactions. I won't sell this token to you, but it's gonna be just a loan, so I won't have to pay taxes from this. So do I understand this correctly? Can you tell more about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're correct. So basically, if it's stable coin, you can borrow typically up to 90%. And it's a relatively cheap interest rate. If it's crypto draft, that's basically just credit, but we do it by using a proof of stake mechanism. So let's say you wanted a $5,000 over the crypto draft. I know your wallet value is $100,000. I know you're good for the money, you'll pay it back. And then obviously the more traditional kind of crypto lending product is a collateralized product, where effectively what you can do is borrow up to a certain LTV. Typically, we go to about 60% on things like Bitcoin, because we don't want to be liquidating users. Some people will go higher than that, but we tend to kind of look at the idea that we want users to be able to take control of that. We don't want people getting liquidated very quickly. And in that instance, you just move those funds to Ledger Vault, and then we basically agree to lend against the collateral. And then obviously that's repaid in the end, and you can repay that in fiat or stablecoin. And the whole idea behind that really is, there's a lot of people, I'm sure some of them are on this call, and I'm certainly one myself, where I don't want to sell my Bitcoin, but I might want to buy a new car. So how do I do that? Taking out a loan against my Bitcoin is probably a good way. So we do that. And one of the things we're doing is we're moving all of our lending on chain, so that there'll be complete transparency. That will probably be fully live in Q2. We're testing it at the moment. But we're trying to avoid the kind of shadow banking world of people like Celsius and Voyager, and putting radical transparency in that, so that people can see where those funds go and what's done with them and where they come from. And people will be able to actually look at proof of liability and proof of reserve in real time. We're actually looking at copying the BitMEX model around proof of liability, which if you haven't seen it, have a look at it. It's really good, because they basically put each individual account as a shard within the model. You can't dox the user, but you can see 100% of liability and liability matching. And that's the standard that we're working towards.
All right. That seems really good. Yeah, there is, I think, a lot of people that wanna use their crypto and don't wanna sell it, but just the long-term diamond hands holders. So that product is gonna be very good. And also, as you said, that there is gonna be LTV about 90% on your stable coin. So I think this is really attractive way to onboard some users, and that's gonna be very useful for everyone in this industry, for sure. So do you have any competition in this what you do, and if you have, so why you are better than them?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question a lot of people ask. And direct competition, I don't think anybody actually has our business model, because we are B2B2C, but you actually sign up with us. You're our customer. as part of that journey. There are people out there like Baanx who actually do a very good job, but they're friends of ours actually as well, but they're US based. But everything for them is a white label underneath the platform. I would say that, obviously there were people like Celsius in the market, and we use that as an example of how we shouldn't be a business like that. So no, honestly, I don't think we do, because if we do have a kind of pure competitor, they certainly don't have the customer base and the reach that we have. There's a few people out there doing kind of various different forms of crypto lending products, but most of them, when you actually look underneath the bonnet, they're not really pure crypto lending. In the same way that, we built on-chain card spending. And I don't think anybody else has done that. Lots of people put out this thing, or Baanx have done that, or crypto.com have done that, but no, they haven't. All they do is they fund it in fiat. They then take those funds from your wallet, your delegation, and they then settle the bills afterwards at the end of the day when they have settler. What we do is you delegate the funds to us straight away, and we push them out straight away. So that the process flow is seamless, end to end, and in real time. So actually, we don't take custody of your asset in that journey, whereas other card providers and wallet providers do. So in short, I don't think we've got a direct competitor. I think there's people who do parts of what we do. I don't think there's anybody who does what we do. I don't think there's anybody who's kind of got the scale of partnership networks that we've got. I should say, sorry, depth of ecosystem that we've got.
So, do you think that all this drama with Celsius and all this old SEFI apps is gonna be benefit for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I think what's happened this year has generally been terrible, right? I mean, it's got to be one of the worst years generally to have been in crypto. And unfortunately, there's some people that are going to have learned some fairly painful lessons this year about, custody and, whether they control their keys or not, and how they, how they should operate. But actually for us, I think we see it as a good thing, because what it shows is that actually the non-custodial model is the right way forward. I've been in this space, as I said, since 2013. I lost a load of Bitcoin on Mt. Gox in 2014. So I kind of learned those lessons a long time ago. And unfortunately, it feels that people are still having to learn those lessons, and it's really sad. But hopefully now, the whole be your own bank, self-custody, your keys, your coins piece will become standard. And actually that makes life, I think, a lot better for everybody. And actually it's truer to the whole principles of the original white paper, Satoshi white paper and everything else for Bitcoin.
So everyone in crypto wants to be decentralized, and everyone wants everything to be decentralized. But we know that in practice, this is sometimes not possible, and especially in this type of apps that you try to build. So where is this sweet point between decentralization and centralization, and how you can do it right to be on the both sides, but still have all this crypto decentralization?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing, right? It's being decentralized, but it's also being able to bridge, and also it's how you bridge, bridging properly. So one of the things we're doing for next year is we're actually going to be integrating into the Circle bridge for payments. If you haven't seen the USDC bridge, it's actually quite interesting because it's fundamentally a bridge of bridges. And we'll be looking at kind of linking into that, so that actually, if you wanted to actually spend in a particular token that wasn't a stable coin, we'll get better settlement and better finality. But I think for us, the key really is how the funds flow through the system, and that needs to be on chain, and that needs to land in a wallet that people can see end to end, so that there's no risk of bad actors. And I think as long as we do that, we can afford to touch those original points, because ultimately, until every merchant has a wallet that you can pay into, we're not going to be able to actually make crypto spendable. Some of the stuff we're doing, we're actually building a product at the moment for a web browser, and I can't actually say who it is yet, but it's one of the top 10. It's over 300 million monthly active users. And one of the things we're actually doing there is we're tokenizing the user, embedding the user into the browser and linking that to their crypto wallet, so that you can do self-custodial payments online, linked to your non-custodial wallet in real time, all on chain. So in that instance, we effectively are just providing a straight pass through, but it's also a pass through you can analyze yourself. And I think that's the key to this. It's like just having those touch points that things work, but actually putting as much transparency into the products and the protocols as we possibly can.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because in your last article on the Medium, there is a sentence that we have launched our program with Reef and signed our biggest client to date, and with nearly 400 million monthly active users. So you are talking about this web browser. That's correct?
That's correct, yeah. I'm not actually allowed to say who it is, but I mean, everybody guesses it's either Opera or Brave, and I can tell you it's one of those two. I was actually with them. In Oslo having dinner a couple of weeks ago. There might be a little hint there.
So, because there was like on the beginning of this month, you had a really big spike in price of your token, and it was like 700%. So do you think that someone leaked info and that's why token pumped?
No, what it was Ledger confirming the rewards package for Ledger Live and Crypto Live, and that is the BXX token. And then basically there'll be a couple of features coming, so you'll be able to buy BXX in Ledger relatively soon. And in January, we're actually going to set out what the range of discounts are around that for people. So you get discounts on trading fees and your lending / increased interest-free lending rates if you hold BXX. So that was basically what it was. We'll also be doing some stuff next year, early in the year with Ledger, where we'll be doing some kind of public stuff about rewards and incentives and loyalty. So that was it. The interesting thing about BXX, right, is we should have roughly, I think, probably around 1 million Ledger users onboarded by, say Q2, Q3 next year. And what that means, there's only 250 million tokens in the world. So if you want a Ledger card, you want borrowing and spending, and you want the maximum discount, there actually aren't enough tokens, which I find quite an interesting thing. And what we've also done as well on that is that basically when we give 1 to 2% cash, but that cash back is actually fully funded through transactional fees that we receive from merchants. So effectively the flow of funds is that when those funds come back, we put them into the token pool, we buy the token, and then we give that to the user. That means we're actually building treasury underneath it. And in addition to that, we've also put in some hard caps around how much BXX you can earn. So that effectively, if you're earning BXX from rewards, what you'll get is a point where you start to then switch to what's known as Plus, which is basically a rewards and loyalty token that doesn't give you the same discounts. So what we really want to create with BXX is a token that kind of people want to hold in their wallet because there's an attributable value to holding it. So if you're a power user, who wants to borrow, $1 million against your, $10 million Bitcoin portfolio, and you can increase your interest-free rate from 10 to 20%, for example, there's actually an immediate kind of $40,000 incentive to hold BXX there. And that's one of the things we tried to design into this token, was a token that basically every crypto user would want to have in their wallet, because if you put it in Tezos, you get discounts. If you put it in Reef, you get discounts. If you put it in 1inch, you get discounts. If you put it in Ledger, you get discounts. And to me, again, no one's done that before, but that talks into the principle of kind of decentralization and giving as many users as possible the benefits of decentralization.
All right. So to summarize it up, that's BXX token. There will be benefits of holding it and stake it, and depends how many of the tokens you have and how many of the tokens you stake. There's gonna be different benefits, like you said, maybe a bigger rate or some other features that we can use. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so as I see now on the CoinMarketCap, there is like circulation supply just 20 million BXX token, and max supply is quite big. So is this the data correct, or there is some changes in the tokenomics?
It's incorrect, actually, and I've actually been chasing CoinMarketCap to update that because the volumes are wrong as well.
So how it is?
So roughly, the circulating supply is roughly 98 million. There's 250 million fully. 250 million tokens issued, and the tokens fully vested, so the tokens fully unlocked as well.
Okay, so if it's fully unlocked, so where is the rest of the tokens? Is it in some kind of reserve funds, or
staking? And then there's we still own roughly half the token, which the intention of that is obviously we will sell that for fiat generated from transactions and then give that to users.
Okay, so we can say that there's gonna be not so small inflation on this token.
Hopefully there will be strong inflation, and we kind of designed it in a way where the token has its own utility, and that's the reason why you'd want to hold the token long term, both inflationary but also utility. Yeah.
Okay, all right. The next question is, what is your marketing strategy?
That's a good one. So we're rebranding the token in Q1. I think the branding at the moment just needs a bit of an update. We'll be creating a separate foundation to handle the kind of DAO elements of this, which are going to happen in Q1. We've then basically for next year got some funds agreed internally for the promotion of this. So that's kind of social media plus other platforms. We've also just done a media partnership with Cointelegraph as well for next year. So what that looks like is that they will be running some press releases for us, giving us some advertising on their site. Plus, we're doing 2 Twitter Spaces with them next year as well. And then, obviously, we also have the benefit of partner channel. So, for example, within Ledger or within Tezos or the other platforms that we work with, what you'll see is that for next year, any mention of the card will also include a mention of the token, a bit like you see Apple Pay accepted here, written everywhere that Apple Pay is accepted. And we're working with some kind of influencers and ambassadors to kind of spread the word. But I think we're quite keen, to make sure that whatever we do from a marketing perspective is sustainable, and also is real. I think there's too much crypto marketing that's gimmicky, and we want to avoid that. We're very happy to sell this on the basis of utility, so we're not planning to go and sponsor a football team or put our name on the side of a stadium. And then really it's outreach, it's public speaking, it's conferences, it's all this kind of stuff, which, we will be engaging in quite a lot next year. And also, we have the ability to mail the waiting lists of our customers as well, with information about the token, which, there's literally millions of email addresses that we have through that method. So realistically, it's just a general awareness and thought leadership piece backed with some sensible budgets and kind of sensible promotion. To me, if you're running a legitimate crypto project, marketing is very important, but actually, community engagement is just as important. I'm always dubious of projects that spend 10 million and spend 5 million on marketing. So we're much more in the kind of, let's do stuff that's sensible, let's do stuff that's sustained. And put it this way, if I look at our roadmap for next year, we've already got probably 20-ish product launches to do next year. So kind of product launch with new partner plus sensible marketing, I think is the right way to play this. Let the utility speak for itself, but make sure that you can find it.
Do you plan to list on some other taxes?
Yeah, we do. So we're working at the moment on a tier 1 listing. And I'm always kind of very careful what I say about listings because you can you can say lots of things and then they let you down. But we're talking to kind of Gate, BXX and KuCoin at the moment. I think Gate's probably the most likely of those. At the moment we're keener to actually push volume. We're also going to move to Uniswap v3 as well, kind of early next year, because that's a slightly better spread for users to buy. Plus, obviously, whilst Ledger's not an exchange, you will be able to buy the token on Ledger in January as well. So there's kind of, there's a range of stuff going on. We've got a pretty good plan, actually. And, one of the things we're actually trying to do is not make it too cluttered because we've got a lot of stuff to announce. And I think sometimes projects that shout too much doesn't look good. It's better to manage those comms and flows and marketing plans. But all is good at this end.
Can you share information with us how many the CL cards you sold so far?
Yeah, sure. So it's roughly 500,000, which, because we only started delivery a little bit earlier in the year. We were supposed to start in June, and then in consultation with our partners, after kind of Celsius and Voyager and everything, it was decided that we should push back because it wasn't the right time to launch a crypto lending product. So we pushed it back. So we shipped roughly 50,000 cards this month alone. And we're onboarding about 2,000 activations a day at the moment.
Does this number satisfy you? What was your estimation?
Yeah, look, for example, Ledger, when we signed that, we forecast 250,000 users over the first 12 months, and we've actually signed 500,000. So we're very happy with that. And one of the things we want to do as we build out the kind of protocol element of this, which you can read about on Medium, is actually try and scale the number of daily active users, because ideally we want to push this up into tens of millions of users, as opposed to just 1 million. But I think if we get ourselves, we should easily be over 1 million customers in 2023. And I say that not just as a prediction, but we sold 500,000 Ledger cards, and then we've got 800,000 users waitlisted across things like Tezos and various other platforms, which we're just waiting for Tezos to do some final changes to their system so that we can put that live. And then, we've also got people like Reef, who are incredibly engaged as a community and really liking that product. So I think, also I know what we've got in pipeline for next year. I think, by the time I come back and talk to you in a year's time, I'd like to be saying we've got, not just 500,000 users, but 500,000 daily active users or something like that. That's very much my hope.
What is your mainstream of revenue? Is that gonna be like selling cards, fees in the app, or VC fund?
Mainstream of revenue is lending at the moment. We're actually looking at a kind of evolution of that, so that we will be offering a slightly wider range of products, because one of the things we want to do is build a range of convenience trading products, so that, for example, if you wanted to trade spot or derivatives or do token exchange, you can do that within your non-custodial wallet, but with guaranteed pricing. So you don't have to go through the pain of moving assets to exchange wallets and waiting 3 hours and seeing that your Ethereum's dipped 4% between the time you started the transaction and finished it. That's something that we're working on. And then also, bringing in the rewards and affiliate income. And, we do make money out of, obviously, the traditional payments world. But actually, from our perspective, we've decided to give that back to the users.
All right.
Because we're a credit product, effectively. We're a corporate card. So we are, a bit like a credit card in terms of the merchant size. So rather than earning consumer interchange, which is typically 20 basis points, we earn corporate interchange, which is like 2%, and we give that back to the user, as opposed to keeping it.
All right, I got interesting question from our the chat, and I'm gonna read it to you. It's gonna be quite challenging, I think. So Love wrote something like that. Simon, right now 95% of projects lost around 90 to 99% valuation. Possibly we are going to face a recession. Why should I invest in BXX in this difficult environment which we have right now? Why should I think about BXX as a long-term project? How can you assure me that this investment is a wise thing to do?
Okay, great question. So look, firstly, I can't give investment advice, unfortunately. There are some laws against that, which I need to respect. But I mean, I think if you think about a recession as a cycle, and you're looking at where you go, what you really want to look at is projects that are building during that stage, right? If I was a owner of Tesla stock, I'd be a little bit uncomfortable right now, right? But backing the next Tesla, is probably a thing to do right now, whatever you think that might be. I think, looking at kind of what you believe on the markets, and let's be honest, nobody really has a belief on that. I actually concur with Arthur Hayes on this, which if you don't read his blog, Crypto Hayes, it's really brilliant. It's worth looking at. And Arthur was saying in his last post, which I think was last week, that, ultimately what he thinks will happen is that markets will be a little bit choppy, and we know that. And then basically going to next year, the debt markets will get choppy. And at that point, central banks will have to restart quantitative easing, which will then start to basically push us into the next bull. And he's predicting a bull, 24, 25. I agree with that. Now, I think in terms of, what else would we say? Well, I sound a bit like my dad when I say this, but ultimately, if you're looking at projects, you've got to look at the fundamentals and you've got to look at why they exist. And I think in crypto, too much of the kind of shitcoin generation has been hype and no real utility or purpose. And I think, we've always tried our best to avoid that. We've always said no. We build product with a purpose and a utility. I can't guarantee that users will adopt it, but I can show you use cases that would explain why you'd want it. And I can show you channels into which I can sell it, right? And therefore, from our perspective, when you cut through all of the, terminology of crypto, and you cut through all of the market sentiment and movements, what you'd say is, look, underneath this, it's a real project with a real business and a real business case, and it's a model that makes money. And therefore, that's why I work here. If I told you the list of places I've declined jobs over the years, including FTX, by the way, I did refuse a job there last year.
So that was a good call that you rejected.
Absolutely. And that's what we do. And by the way, genuinely, guys, I always think it's really interesting to try and share notes on where to read. But if you do have a look at cryptohaze.com, which is Arthur Hayes' blog, it's really, really well written, and he has some great market insights. And Arthur's been in the space since 2013. He's written some brilliant stuff about FTX and Sam as well recently, and he has a real insight. So if you're not following him, have a look. He's also a friend of mine, which I feel quite happy about because I like the guy.
All right. So now I want to ask you which token are going to be available in the app to put as a collateral. Is it going to be just this main like Ethereum, Bitcoin, or you're going to expand to many different assets?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've been trying to do, basically we focused initially on the kind of top 10, right? Because I can lend against those. I can lend against those cheaply, right? What I don't want to do is say, hey, I'll lend you against your Algorand, but I've got to lend you against it at 14%, right? Because if I lend you, half the value of that at 14%, the market goes the wrong way. I've got to liquidate you, unfortunately. Because as we know from Celsius, if you don't manage default, you default, right? So what we're focusing on initially is the kind of top 10 tokens. Apart from Binance, we won't touch anything associated with Binance for reasons I won't get into on this call. But really, it's the kind of whole coin movement. And what we've actually found, in all honesty, is that 99% of the demand in this space is for Bitcoin and Ethereum lending. If you had, for example, tokens like Solana, for example, when they were at 240 last November, not many people were actually trying to lend against it because it was either locked or they'd staked it. So it's generally that. But we'll look over time to build into a model where we will lend against any token with a certain market cap and a certain daily volume. That's the next stage of the journey. But obviously, given the way that markets have been right now, I don't think it's the right time to launch that product. I want to launch a product where I can say to someone, I will lend you at this rate. And those rates will be reasonable and they'll be available long term. I don't want to create a product where I'm liquidating you or I'm having to charge you 20%. To me, that's just not fair on the consumer.
All right. I saw in your article on the Medium that there is a sentence like, we are delighted to announce that BXX will become the first multi-chain financial protocol. What do you mean by multi-chain? That's you can operate on a few different chains, but when you offer this this loans on the BTC and Ethereum, how does it gonna be multi-chain?
Absolutely. So what we're working on is basically the principle that we're moving everything on chain and we're going to build on multiple chains, right? So the moment we're built on Ethereum. We will be building some layer 2 integrations into BTC. And then we will be, and then we'll be also building on 2 or 3 other chains over the next kind of year or two. We'll be announcing which is the first chain we're going to build on. But the idea is that basically we move all of our financial services transactions over time onto chain and onto different chains. So if, for example, you just wanted to stay within one particular ecosystem like Solana or Nia or Ethereum, you could do so as a user, which means that basically those underlying chains will generate utility and more transactional volume. Also, what we're looking at is the idea that you can, through bridging technology, you can pick and switch, so you can route the transaction in the most effective way possible, so that if Ethereum gas fees spike, you could actually wrap it and put it through an L2 and cut the gas fee. So that's the kind of broader principle that we're working to. But to some extent, that's probably the vision is probably kind of 12 to 24 months away from being delivered. But actually, we are starting to build various components now to enable that. Because before, we were just a token with a CeFi linkage, and now we're basically becoming pure DeFi.
Okay. So that's explained a lot. And that there is one thing that someone from the chat want to clarify. So some Robo, he's saying, just for the sake of 100% clarity, the Ledger customers using payment card issued by you guys has 100% control over their funds. So there is no weak points there. Still, everything is in the control of the users, and there is no risk attached to using that card.
Right. Yeah. So all funds are yours until you make a transaction. You send them to us in real time, and that's it. It completes the transaction, and it's all underwritten by the trust agreement with MasterCard. So it's as good as any MasterCard payment you'll ever make. And we're actually, by the way, the only crypto program manager globally to actually have a deal with MasterCard. Nobody else has that. So I think if you actually read back to MasterCard Q1 2022 accounting reports, the quarter, they actually listed one of their core actions in Q1 as signing a deal with us, which we found hilarious, because we're like 50 people in a decentralized team, with people phoning us up from the press asking us about this deal we just done with MasterCard. Like, what? Kind of funny. But yeah, so hopefully that's answered your question. Just by the way, I have roughly 7 minutes until I have to jump on an AMA with our own community actually on Telegram. You're all welcome to jump over there if you want, but I'm happy to answer some questions up until then. I just wanted to let you know so I don't have to run away from the chat.
Yeah, sure. So I think that we are almost, we cover almost all my questions. There's going to be just one last question from the chat. And The Wire, he's asking you, Simon, how long your runway reserve will last since you do not have revenue streams right now? And are you looking for a further VC investment round to support development?
I mean, look, we're always looking to increase runway. Of course, we raised 15 million earlier this year. And we will be raising some money next year. But at the moment, actually, we do have revenue, and actually, our losses are not that high. On a monthly basis, I think we're losing about $150,000. So we've got a fairly long runway, and we're also doing a few other deals at the moment with different partners like MasterCard, who agreed to pay for a load of stuff. So we're trying to kind of manage our way through a recession sensibly by making sure that we've got a long runway and making sure that if we're raising money to scale rather than just pay costs. Because I think I was in VC before I came into this business. And, the thing is, it's like, if you're losing money because you're buying things and building, that's fine. The payoff is there, but you can't afford to have heavy operational losses. That doesn't work. That's the kind of, the classic kind of it won't last model. So we've actually got a pretty well-capitalized business, but, if anybody has any ideas or wants to reach out, myself or Garth, our CEO, always happy to have a chat. And, we never say no to the right funding. People want to offer it to us.
All right. Do you have like Discord community? Because on the CoinMarketCap I can only see for the Telegram, and on your website there is nothing about Telegram or even Discord.
We have Telegram, and the Telegram group is. Hang on, I'll put it in the chat here.
Sure, that would be great.
So. I'm still an admin from an ammo I did the other day for CoinStore, which is a bit strange. So every time I log into Telegram, we got 7,000 messages, people complaining about CoinStore. Hang on, I'll drop this into the other chat in a second. I'll drop that chat in, but it's the group is just Baanx. BXX. I'll drop it into the text chat in a second. We probably should set up a Discord actually. Historically, I don't think we've ever had a group on there, so I will add that to my list of things to do for the new year. I'll let you guys know when it's live.
All right, that's great. Okay, we'll give you time to prepare for the next AMA, and that was a great conversation with you. You are doing something that we never had this kind of project here for the AMA, so that was very interesting conversation. For sure, we wish you all the best because you're doing interesting stuff, and we want it to work for sure, because there's gonna be benefits for us too. So so thank you very much, and see you on your Telegram. I think.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate it. And obviously, hopefully I'll come back in future. And just want to wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Sure. Merry Christmas to you too. Thanks.
Take care, guys. Thank
Bye.
you.